was supposed to be a quiet escape, just a week away from the city noise, deadlines, and her clingy ex. Natalie, a 28-year-old freelance marketer from Philly, had found a secluded Airbnb cabin nestled deep in the Catskills. The listing looked perfect. Rustic charm, a wood-burning stove, huge windows overlooking the trees, and a host with a 5-star rating who called himself Tom. When she arrived, the air was thick with pine and the sharp scent of damp moss. Her boots crunched on the gravel driveway as Tom greeted her with a smile that seemed a little too fixed, a handshake that lingered half a second too long. Inside, the cabin was cozy but eerily silent. No TV, no cell service, just the occasional groan of old wood settling. Tom had already stocked the fridge with groceries she hadn't asked for and pointed out the firewood, just in case it got cold. That night, as wind pressed against the windows and the fireplace crackled, Natalie wrapped herself in a blanket and tried to shake the feeling that she wasn't entirely alone. The first night passed without much incident, just the restless creaks of the cabin and the occasional scrape of tree branches against the roof. Natalie chalked up the weird vibe to the sudden shift in environment. City noise had a way of masking your thoughts. Out here, every sound had weight, every silence, presence. The second day started normal enough. Tom showed up mid-morning with a basket of pastries from a local bakery. She hadn't asked for them, but thanked him anyway, trying to ignore how long he stood at the threshold, eyes lingering on the interior like he was memorizing it. When he finally turned to leave, she caught him glance toward the narrow trail behind the cabin, one she hadn't noticed on the map. Later, when she stepped out for a walk, that same trail caught her eye again. The ground was disturbed, leaves freshly moved, but she decided not to follow it. Something about the way the trees bent toward it felt unnatural, like they were leaning in, listening. That evening, she noticed the groceries in the fridge had been rearranged. Not missing, just moved. Her oat milk was suddenly in the back, next to a Tupperware container she swore wasn't there before. It was unlabeled, sealed tight. She left it alone. When she texted a friend about it, the message didn't go through. Still no signal. By the third night, things felt heavier. A draft rolled through the cabin even with all the windows shut. The smell of wood smoke hung too thick in the air, almost sweet, almost metallic. She kept thinking she saw movement outside the window, just the edge of something ducking behind a tree, vanishing the moment she turned her head. She closed the blinds and lit every lamp, trying to drown the paranoia in warmth and light. At 1:13 a.m., she woke up cold. The fire had died. The cabin was pitch dark. Her phone, which she'd left charging, was unplugged and sitting across the room. A soft creak came from the hallway. She held her breath. Another creak, closer this time. She grabbed her phone, no battery, and reached for her flashlight. She stepped toward the door and noticed something that made her skin crawl. On the floor, near the baseboard, lay a dried, muddy footprint. Not hers. Larger. Barefoot. The next morning, Tom returned unannounced. No basket this time. Just a casual knock and that same too-wide grin. He said he'd been walking the trails and saw smoke. Figured he'd check in. Natalie lied. Said she was heading out for the day. Tom's smile flickered for half a second before he said, almost too casually, "Strange. I didn't hear your car last night." She hadn't mentioned driving anywhere. Back inside, she locked the doors and went room to room, checking every corner. In the guest room's closet, she found something she hadn't noticed before. A tiny hole in the back wall, like a drilled peephole. Behind it, nothing but blackness. She pressed her ear against the wall and swore she could hear breathing. Slow, steady, rhythmic. That night, she didn't sleep. The fourth night, the air inside the cabin felt wrong, thicker somehow, like it was holding its breath. Natalie kept every light on, sat with her back against the wall, and clutched the fire poker like a lifeline. She hadn't slept in over 24 hours, and the shadows on the walls had started to twitch when she blinked too long. But she wasn't imagining the sound she heard just after midnight, a slow, deliberate scraping along the side of the cabin, like something metallic being dragged across wood. She moved to the window, careful not to touch the blinds. Outside, under the dim glow of the porch light, she saw movement, a shape, a person. But it wasn't Tom. It was someone else, taller, bulkier, wearing a hood and carrying something long and wrapped in canvas. They didn't knock. They just circled the cabin, slow and steady, as if counting the windows. Her breath caught when the porch light flickered, then went out. In the sudden dark, the only sound was her pulse pounding in her ears and the unmistakable squeak of the back door handle twisting. It was locked. She checked it 3 times. The sound stopped. Seconds passed. Then the unmistakable click of a key turning in the lock. She bolted for the bedroom and shoved the dresser in front of the door, her hands shaking so hard she could barely grip the edge. The back door creaked open with the slow, wet groan of rusted hinges. Heavy footsteps moved through the kitchen, across the wood floor, unhurried, like whoever it was had done this before. She crouched in the corner, heart jackhammering, her phone still dead, the fire poker held out in front of her like it could actually help. The footsteps paused just outside the bedroom, then silence. The knob twisted, stopped. Then, from under the door, a thin black wire slid in. It snaked forward across the floor like it was alive. She realized what it was, an endoscopic camera. Her blood turned ice. She screamed, kicking it back out just as the person on the other side rammed the door. The frame cracked. A second hit nearly split it. Natalie grabbed the lamp, smashed out the window, and without thinking, climbed through, slicing her thigh on the glass as she tumbled onto the ground. She didn't look back. She ran barefoot through the trees, bleeding, breath tearing through her lungs, branches whipping her face. Behind her, someone gave chase. Fast, heavy footfalls crashing through the underbrush. But she had a head start. She didn't stop until she reached the road and flagged down a passing car, bloodied, hysterical. The police arrived 40 minutes later. Inside the cabin, they found a crawl space under the floorboards. Inside it, tools, zip ties, chloroform wipes, and photos. Photos of Natalie, sleeping, cooking, walking around in her pajamas. Dated from the moment she arrived. Natalie stayed with a friend in the city for a while after that night. She barely spoke, barely slept. Every creak in the floorboards made her jump. She kept the blinds closed, unplugged the smart TV, ditched her phone. When the detectives followed up, they told her the cabin had been scrubbed. No prints, no trace of the man who chased her. The Airbnb listing had vanished, deleted mid-investigation. They couldn't even confirm who Tom really was. The name, the ID, the profile photo, it was all fake. Weeks later, her laptop started acting strange. The webcam light would flicker on randomly, even when the device was closed. She chalked it up to paranoia until she got an email from an address she didn't recognize. No subject, no message, just an attachment. A photo of her. Taken from outside a window. Not the cabin. her friend's apartment. She moved again. New city, new locks, no social media. She tried to rebuild, but something always felt off. Packages would arrive she never ordered. She started noticing people looking at her a second too long on the subway. Her therapist said it was trauma, the mind's way of processing fear. But some nights, in that space between waking and sleep, she hears it, the slow, deliberate twist of a doorknob. Just once. Then silence. Every time she gets up to check, the locks are untouched. But once, on a fogged bathroom mirror, a fingerprint smeared downward like someone had dragged it with intention. Only she had been home that day. She doesn't tell anyone anymore. She just waits, sleeps with a knife by her bed, and listens. Someone still has her photo. Someone still knows where she sleeps. The fake host was never found. The crawl space had more than one camera feed, and that fingerprint on the mirror, too high to be hers, too fresh to be old, never matched anyone in the system. Ryan had just finished college and was drowning in rejection emails when the offer came in. A sleek tech startup based in downtown Chicago with a vague job title and a ridiculous salary for someone with no experience. He didn't ask many questions. Their office sat in an old warehouse turned industrial loft. Exposed brick, steel beams, way too much glass. It smelled faintly of fresh paint and synthetic lemon, like a hotel that hadn't been lived in yet. Only a handful of people were ever around, all oddly quiet, polite but distant. No small talk, no music, not even the buzz of background chatter, just the hum of ceiling vents and the occasional echo of his own footsteps. His badge gave him access to everything, but no one told him what to do. They said he was in onboarding, yet days passed with no tasks, no meetings, just silence, and that creeping sense that he was being watched, even when no one was in the room. By the end of his first week, Ryan still hadn't been given a single assignment. Every morning, he'd badge in, sit at his glossy, fingerprint-free desk, and wait. The office always felt just a little too cold. The light from the floor-to-ceiling windows filtered through matte blinds that never moved. No chatter, no keyboards clacking. Just the mechanical hum of the HVAC system and the occasional shuffle of polished shoes on the concrete floor. He started exploring, curious, bored, and a little unnerved. The layout of the office was weird. Hallways looped back on themselves, elevators that only opened on certain floors depending on the time of day. One day, he stumbled onto a server room. The door was ajar, humming with low-frequency noise, cables sprawled like veins across the floor. Inside, racks of hard drives blinked in perfect sync. A single desk sat in the corner with a wall of monitors, all displaying security feeds. He only caught a glimpse, his own face, live, sitting at his desk from overhead. The door slammed shut behind him before he could step in. Locked. The next day, his badge access changed. He couldn't enter half the places he'd walked into before. He asked HR and they told him he must be mistaken. He hadn't had that level of clearance to begin with. When he got home, he noticed something different about his apartment. The smell. Too clean, like someone had scrubbed it with ammonia. The photo frames were slightly crooked, like they'd been taken down and rehung. He checked his laptop camera settings. The green light had flickered once, briefly, just before shutting off. He started sleeping with a knife next to the bed. Back at the office, the building felt emptier than before. He began recognizing the same faces repeating daily, but they didn't acknowledge him anymore. Just moved in coordinated pairs, always silent, always staring straight ahead. When he asked one woman where the bathroom was, she blinked slowly and whispered, "We're all being evaluated," then walked away, stiff, like her skin didn't quite fit. In the break room, the coffee machine hissed out hot water, but no one ever drank it. The fridge was filled with energy drinks and protein bars, each labeled with initials that didn't match anyone he'd met. Then came the package, a small, unmarked box left on his desk overnight. Inside, a single flash drive. No label, no note. Against his better judgment, he plugged it in. A folder opened automatically. Inside, video files, all time-stamped, all labeled with his name. They showed him, from different angles, entering the office, riding the train, asleep in his bed. One showed him staring directly at the camera, expression blank, except he had no memory of it. He slammed the laptop shut, heart pounding. The screen flashed once before powering off. From the corner of the room, his office phone rang for the first time. A single shrill tone, then silence. He didn't answer. Ryan didn't go home that night. Something told him not to. Instead, he stayed in the office past midnight, sitting silently at his desk, heart racing in his chest, waiting for something he couldn't name. The place was dead quiet. No lights on in the upper floors, no janitors, no hum of the vending machine. Just the soft flicker of overhead fluorescence and the buzz of the exit sign above the stairwell. Around 1:08 a.m., the hallway lights outside his office shut off one by one, like someone was walking past them. Click, click, click. Darkness crept closer. Then his monitor blinked to life on its own. The same folder from the flash drive reappeared, this time with a new file. The label read, "Final Evaluation." He clicked it against every instinct. The footage was grainy black and white security cam. It showed a basement room, stark concrete walls, a metal chair in the center under a single bulb, and someone was in the chair, tied up, slumped over, mouth taped shut. Ryan leaned in, squinting. It was him. He watched, paralyzed, as shadowy figures moved around the bound version of himself. No faces, just long silhouettes. One of them walked up to the camera and stared into the lens. The screen glitched. When it came back, the figure was gone. The room was empty. Then the lights in Ryan's office cut out. Total darkness. He jumped up, knocking over his chair, breath shallow and fast. The emergency lights kicked in, glowing red and dim. From somewhere down the hallway, he heard soft footsteps, not hurried, measured. He crept toward the stairwell, pressing himself against the wall. As he reached the door, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. His ID badge was gone, still clipped to his belt earlier. Now, missing. He pushed through the stairwell door. Cold air rushed over him like someone exhaling in his face. At the bottom, something was moving. Heavy breathing echoed up the shaft, low and ragged. He bolted back into the hallway and ran, passing office after office, every glass wall now dark. But behind each, he could swear he saw something, figures standing still, just watching. No movement, just silhouettes in the dark. He reached the main lobby. The front doors were locked. From behind him, a voice spoke over the intercom. Calm, synthetic, emotionless. Candidate 06 has completed observation phase. A low beep followed, then the whir of mechanisms unlocking. One of the glass walls slid open. Ryan turned. A group stepped out, Not people, at least not anymore. Their faces were smooth, unblinking, like masks stretched too tight. They moved in sync, their bodies stiff, their feet making no sound on the floor. The one in front held a clipboard. "Welcome to integration," it said. Ryan turned and ran, slamming his fist into the emergency door until it gave way. Sirens blared as he tore through the stairwell, 2 steps at a time, every shadow behind him alive with movement. When he finally burst into the cold night air, the street was empty. No traffic, no lights. Just the building behind him, glowing faintly from within, as if nothing had happened at all. Ryan left Chicago the next morning, packed a single bag, shut off his phone, and didn't say goodbye to anyone. He rented a car under a fake name, drove for 16 hours straight, and checked into a rundown roadside motel in Montana, where the only questions they asked were cash or card. For a while, he tried to convince himself it was over, that whatever he'd walked into was some kind of sick tech cult or a psych experiment gone wrong. But at night, he still dreamt about the faces, those hollow, perfect copies, standing motionless behind the glass. He didn't go near screens anymore. No Wi-Fi, no emails. He bought burner phones and snapped them in half after a week. But even then, something always followed. The hum of fluorescent lights in gas stations seemed just a little too loud. The security cameras in grocery stores always turned as he passed. At first, he thought he was just paranoid. Then, a hotel clerk handed him a receipt with his old company's name printed at the bottom. Different font, different paper. But the logo was unmistakable. One night, in the mirror above the sink, he swore he saw someone behind him. Not moving, just standing there, wearing his exact clothes, same haircut, same scar on the chin. But when he turned around, the room was empty. After that, he stopped checking mirrors. Now he keeps to himself, but sometimes he wakes up and finds his things rearranged. The chair pulled back from the table. The light bulb in the bathroom switched out. The sheets tucked tighter than he left them. He tells himself he's still free. But deep down, something feels different, like he's been replaced in pieces, quietly, without him noticing. Somewhere out there, someone still wears his face. The badge he lost was never recovered. The security footage never surfaced. And lately, when he speaks, his voice echoes a half-second too late, like something else is trying to keep up from just beneath his skin. It was the first summer Jake had the house to himself. His parents were overseas, his sister was off at college, and the 2-story place in suburban Oregon felt weirdly big without anyone else in it. Most nights he stayed up late gaming, ordering takeout, blasting music with no one around to complain. But then his sister's old friend Mark started dropping by. Mark was older, early 30s, clean-cut, always smelled like expensive cologne and leather. Said he was just checking in while the family was gone. At first it was cool. He brought beer, shared stories, treated Jake like a grown-up. But the longer he stayed, the stranger it got. Mark never knocked. He started showing up at night, letting himself in like he lived there. Always smiling. Always watching. It started small. Mark would show up with snacks or energy drinks, joking that he was the cool uncle type, even though he wasn't related to them at all. Jake didn't question it at first. He figured his sister had told him to check in, or maybe his parents had. But when he texted her about it, she responded with a confused, I haven't talked to Mark in years." That night, Jake noticed the back door was unlocked. He was sure he'd shut it. He double-checked every window, every lock, just to be safe. The next morning, a mug was sitting in the sink, coffee grounds still damp inside. He didn't drink coffee. Mark kept popping in, always calm, always smiling. He never mentioned that text, just said things like, "I know this house like the back of my hand," or "Your dad used to leave that window cracked open too." Jake laughed it off until he realized he'd never told Mark which room was his. And yet one night, Mark was already upstairs when he got home, sitting on the floor of Jake's bedroom, flipping through an old photo album like it belonged to him. He stood up slowly, smiled, and said, "Just reminiscing." Jake stopped sleeping well after that. Every creak in the hallway felt louder. The shadows in the stairwell seemed to shift when he wasn't looking. One night, he caught movement on the baby monitor his mom still used to check the dog when they were gone. He had repurposed it to watch the downstairs living room. The camera flickered. For a split second, someone was sitting on the couch, legs crossed, just sitting, staring at nothing. When he ran down, the room was empty, but the cushions were still indented. Mark began referencing things Jake hadn't said out loud. His schedule, his online orders, the fact that he was thinking about quitting the swim team. Once, he said, "I liked that girl you were texting last night," even though Jake had barely messaged her. The final straw came when Jake woke up at 2:46 a.m., drenched in sweat, and saw that his bedroom door was cracked open. A pair of shoes he didn't own sat neatly just inside the doorway. Next to them, his phone, placed perfectly on the floor, the camera app open and recording. The red light blinked once, then stopped. Jake barely remembered moving. 1 second he was frozen in bed, eyes locked on that little blinking red light. The next he was scrambling for his phone. But the second he touched it, the screen went black, completely dead, like the battery had been drained in seconds. He didn't even bother checking the shoes. He knew they weren't his. They were too big, worn in all the wrong places and damp, like they'd been left outside in the rain. He crept into the hallway, barefoot, his skin buzzing with adrenaline. The house was silent except for the low hum of the fridge and the slow tick of the living room clock echoing through the walls. At the top of the stairs, he heard it, a soft shuffle like someone dragging their feet across carpet. Then a voice, low, calm, almost playful. "Couldn't sleep either, huh?" Mark. Jake held his breath and leaned against the wall, heart slamming in his chest. He could see the glow of a light downstairs, soft and yellow, leaking out from the cracked door to the basement, the one they never used. His parents kept it bolted, but now it was open. He moved down the stairs slowly, each step groaning under his weight. At the bottom, the basement door creaked as it swayed open further on its own. Inside, the light flickered from a single overhead bulb, swaying slightly like it had been hit. The air was damp, heavy with the sour smell of mold and something metallic, blood or rust. He couldn't tell. And there, at the far end of the room, sat Mark. Not standing, sitting, in one of the old wooden dining chairs they'd thrown down there years ago. His head tilted slightly, eyes glassy. His mouth moved, but no words came out. Jake almost turned and ran until he saw what was behind him. Taped to the far wall were photos, dozens of them. Polaroids, printed screenshots, blurry night vision frames. All of Jake, sleeping, showering, sitting at his desk. One photo showed him from behind, brushing his teeth. But he was sure, absolutely sure, he'd been alone that night. In the center of the wall, someone had written in sharp black marker, "You look just like him." Mark stood without a word. Jake stumbled back, knocking over a crate. The crash echoed, and the bulb above them sparked, flashing violently. When Jake turned to run, Mark lunged, too fast, too silent, his arms out like he wasn't trying to hurt him, but catch him. Jake bolted up the stairs, slammed the door, and locked it. He didn't stop moving, not until he was outside in the cold, barefoot blood dripping from a cut on his foot he hadn't even felt. The house behind him stood perfectly still, not a single light on. No movement. Mark never came out. Jake spent the rest of the night sitting on the curb, shaking, barefoot and shivering under the orange street lamp glow. He didn't go back inside. When the sun finally rose, he called his aunt and begged to stay with her. She didn't ask questions, just drove over and picked him up. They never spoke about what he saw. He never filed a report. Something about explaining it felt impossible, unreal, like dragging a dream into daylight that didn't belong there. But a week later, when he returned with his dad to grab the rest of his things, the basement was empty. No photos, no chair. The door had been rebolted from the inside. Nothing looked out of place except one detail: the shoes were gone. A few days after that, his sister finally called him back. She sounded confused, groggy, like she'd been sick. Said she hadn't seen Mark since she was 19. Said he moved out of state years ago. Said he'd been acting strange near the end, showing up at her dorm uninvited, talking about taking care of family. She blocked his number. Then she paused. Said she never told him their address, that only their parents had it. Jake barely sleeps now. Every so often, when he's about to drift off, he hears the faint sound of someone stepping softly just outside his door, like socked feet dragging across hardwood. He started locking it every night, then stacking things in front of it. And still, some mornings, he wakes up to find the chair from the hallway quietly moved inside his room, facing his bed. No one knows how Mark got in, or why he vanished without a trace. The photos were real, but never found again. And now, every time Jake moves houses, the same chair shows up, already inside, already facing the bed.